did it. You made it this far. Now we're going to talk about hypocalcemia, the causes and the symptoms. We're going to cover all of hypocalcemia in this video. One of the causes of hypocalcemia is hypoparathyroidism. As we said, calcium is a teenager, doesn't come out of his room unless his mom calls him. His mom's the parathyroid gland, and she calls him with the word parathyroid hormone. If she isn't around, she can't call him, he can't come out of his room. So anything that affects the parathyroid gland or makes it function insufficiently will lower your calcium levels, whatever it is. Another one is blood transfusions. Blood transfusions? What? How? Well, let me explain. I added salt to this water here. You see how murky it is? Imagine the salt in this water is the calcium floating in your blood, okay? It's highly concentrated. Now, if I add a blood transfusion, which isn't a blood transfusion, it's just red blood cells. There's nothing else in it except packed red blood cells. See how less murky it is? You've now diluted the calcium. That transfusion you're giving your patient doesn't come with calcium, nutrients, or anything else except red blood cells in order to try and pump up their hemoglobin. When your patient is getting massive infusions of blood, whether it be in a trauma situation or just a massive GI bleed, if you're giving multiple transfusions, you need to know what their calcium level is, as well as a lot of other electrolytes, because again, that pack of red blood cells is only red blood cells. So you can have rhythm changes as well as symptoms of electrolyte insufficiencies if you're giving many transfusions in a rapid rate. So please be mindful of this and check the calcium level if you know your patient's going to has been getting many blood transfusions. Another cause of hypocalcemia is actually hyperphosphatemia, meaning high amounts of phosphorus in your blood. So phosphorus is the older brother of calcium, and much like siblings, they don't like each other. They stay away from each other. If phosphorus goes up, calcium goes down. If calcium goes up, phosphorus goes down. The body balances these two ions in order to keep homeostasis. So just remember that phosphorus and calcium are siblings. They butt heads. They avoid each other at all costs when it comes to levels in the blood. The fourth thing we're going to cover about how somebody becomes hypocalcemic is alkalosis. If you don't know the word alkalosis or acidosis, which I'm going to talk about, I'll have to cover those in another series because that can get pretty detailed. But if you know what alkalosis is, which is when the acidity in your blood becomes more basic, it's less acidic. In alkalosis, there is less hydrogen ions in your blood. And that less amount of hydrogen ions actually causes calcium to bind to protein more often. That teenager's picking up his controller and he's becoming more useless. So in an alkalytic state where you're greater than 7.45, your body is going to bind calcium more to protein, and your calcium levels, even your ionized calcium levels, are going to drop, making you hypocalcemic. Now, if one way, being alkalytic, causes you to become hypocalcemic, typically the flip-flop applies. So if you become more acidic, if your blood is more acidic, less than 7.35, and again, if you don't know this, I'll have to cover this in another series because that can get pretty detailed, or you could research it yourself. If you're more acidic, the calcium ions actually detach from protein. They become more effective. The teenager is going to put this down, he's going to go outside, and he's going to be effective. So that means there is more free-floating calcium, more ionized calcium, and your calcium levels will go up, making you hypercalcemic, which we'll cover when we talk about hypercalcemia. There are other things that can cause you to become hypocalcemic. It can be GI issues, Crohn's disease, malabsorption, certain drugs you take, protamine, contrast dyes. I can't cover absolutely everything. I'm here to cover the more major things as well as the more typical things that you're going to come across, or the things you probably wouldn't even think of, like the blood transfusions. Okay, so let's get into the symptoms of hypocalcemia. But I want you to remember something. There are two things we need to think about: how hypocalcemia affects the muscles in your arms and legs and everywhere else, and how it affects the heart. Two separate things. Do not combine the two. What happens in the muscles and what happens in the heart are two separate things. So I'm going to give you two principles. When calcium is absent or hypo in the blood, the effect it has on the muscles is excitement. Hypocalcemia causes nerve and muscular excitement. But in the heart, everything's down. So let's start with the muscles. Cramping. Cramping is a symptom of hypocalcemia. Why is cramping a symptom of hypocalcemia? So with the absence of calcium, the nerves and muscles get excited. The scientific version is that calcium channels are more of a slower channel. So without the use of calcium channels, sodium channels then, which are a faster channel. So the influx of sodium then causes your muscles to depolarize more quickly and makes them cramp for no reason. But you don't need to know that. Just know that the nerves and the muscles in hypocalcemia are more excited, so they jump and they squeeze and they do their own thing, and you get calf cramps and you get arm cramps because they're excited. Another symptom could be seizures. Again, excitement, seizures, very excited, moving all over, loss of consciousness, depending on the seizure, but excitement. Hypocalcemia, everything's excited, everything wants to go, everything wants to move, okay? Oh, and by the way, that excitement has a name. It's called tetany. So when you're explaining it, you can sound very smart to the doctors. Okay, so now we come to the two 100% differential, it can't be anything else except hypocalcemia symptoms. And that is Kvotstick sign, however you pronounce it, okay, Kvotstick sign, and Trousseau's sign, all right? And the best way I can explain those to you is with this video. So as you can see, again, to reiterate, hypocalcemia causes a lot of excitement in the muscles. Things are firing and twitching and your face is going off from just a flick. Excitement. Just remember, hypocalcemia, excitement, excitement, excitement. Now let's talk about hypocalcemia's effect on the myocardium, the myocardial muscles. It's different. So hypocalcemia is actually going to decrease the heart's contractibility. It will not squeeze as hard. Let's think about it. If you're a seasoned nurse or you're coming out of nursing school, I don't know where you are watching this video, but you give a calcium channel blocker. What happens? Your blood pressure goes down. You are blocking the channels of calcium to go into the myocardial muscles and thus less squeeze. Why is there less squeeze and less contractility with less calcium in your blood? Well, this is about to get a little deep, so I'm just warning you. Your cells are negative on the inside, with the extracellular fluid being more positive. There's more calcium outside, there's more positive ions than there are on the inside. When two magnetic forces, a positive and negative, reverse their polarization, electricity ensues. It's called action potential. When the heart reaches a certain action potential, it fires. But it needs calcium in order for it to make that switcheroo. That switch happens 1,000 billion times a second so that your heart can squeeze. I keep doing it over here. Your heart can squeeze. But without that reverse in polarity, there is no electricity, there is no squeezing in the myocardials. Check this out. Okay, so I have this hooked up to my car battery. This is positive outside of the cell. This is negative inside of the cell. I want you to see what happens when they reverse polarity. Here we go. See that? When they reverse polarity. So without those electrical impulses, there is going to be less contractility, so less squeeze. With less squeeze, less cardiac output. With less cardiac output, eventually hypotension. Those three you will always see as symptoms of hypocalcemia, but they're all related to each other, and one wouldn't occur without the other one being affected. Another thing you're going to see is bradycardia. Again, less electrical activity is going to slow your heart rate, as well as prolonged QT intervals. We don't like prolonged QT intervals because it means that depolarized myocardial cell is taking longer to repolarize in order to fire again. So this thing can cause stuff like pauses in your heart or something called R on T phenomenon, which can throw you into death rhythms. There you have it. Clinical manifestations, aka symptoms of hypocalcemia. Muscles, excited, excited, excited. Heart, slow down. You're gonna remember this, trust me. So how do you treat hypocalcemia, right? This is what we're in. This is what we're in the business of. We treat things, we fix it. Well, if the patient is symptomatic, right? Because just because you're a little hypocalcemic doesn't mean you're symptomatic. We care about symptomatic hypocalcemia. There's a lot of drugs available. You can give something called calcium chloride. Calcium chloride. Chloride is another ion. So maybe see what their chloride levels before you do calcium chloride, because there's another option called calcium gluconate. That's a glucose molecule. So there are different options available depending on what the other labs are in your patient's daily labs. There are oral calcium replacements, but typically in the hospital, we're going to give it TIV. Unless it's a chronic issue, they may send your patient home on something that is more long-term in a pill form. And that's it. That's hypocalcemia. It might have felt like it took a long time to get here, but I want you to build your knowledge off of solid foundations. You got to know the basics and the whys of things so that you can make decisions based on that, on those whys and that foundation. So next video we're going to talk about is hypercalcemia. Okay, we're getting there, but it's going to take a long time to go through all the electrolytes. So stick with me, and I swear you're going to know this stuff, and you're going to be wowing people in the hospital in no time.